Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, we are today assembled to engage in a meaningful discussion on a subject which transcends individual interest and which allows us to embrace the exchange of ideas and dreams, yes, dreams, on a concept which is at the very core of our existence, community. In this exchange, Mr. Vice President, we commit to the people's business to pass the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2020. I use the word transcend deliberately for three reasons, since that word means literally, quote, to be or go beyond the range or limits of a field of activity or conceptual sphere, unquote. Firstly, with this bill we endorse and are enriched by the lessons learned from the historical antecedents where we are to be of the well-meaning work accomplished in the field of local government since the first post-independence Synonym Committee, a history already well articulated by all previous contributors to this debate. Secondly, our being goes beyond our lessons learned from our history, is arguably unprecedented. By expanse, I refer to the scope of the national legislation which has been overhauled. One only has to look at the long title of the bill. It is an act to amend the Municipal Corporations Act, the Burial Grounds Act, the Cremation Act, Advertisements Regulation Act, the Recreation Grounds and Pastures Act, the Highways Act, the Dogs Act, the Property Taxes Act, and the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act. By expanse, I refer to the scope of national legislation which has been overhauled. By depth of and degree, I refer in particular to the very comprehensive national consultation which is epitomized by the work of the Joint Select Committee whose report we have before us. Thirdly, Mr. Vice President, the conceptual sphere which this bill engages and seeks to articulate is to do more than to just remove the red tape and bureaucracy that hinders, some may say frustrates, local government bodies from doing their work in an efficient and effective manner. The bill outlines this government's vision to give significant and meaningful autonomy to municipalities by giving them the executive authority to manage and govern their affairs in the interest of and with meaningful participation of communities. Save to adopt, which I do, I need not repeat what has already been addressed by honourable members on the government side, but at the risk of seeming preferential, I take the opportunity today to salute and to adopt the comprehensive, meaningful, and eloquent maiden remarks of Senator Lawrence Hislop, who treated us on our first occasion to a compelling treatise on the precedent set already for this bill by the Tobago House of Assembly enabling legislative framework. Some of the key features of this bill, Mr. President, propose major cornerstones with the introduction of an executive council to supplement the existing municipal structures. There will now be provision for the following, for example, better appropriation, auditing, and accountability of funds with the involvement of auditors in accordance with the new subsection 3A, safeguarding the wealth of the people for the people, with the Minister of Finance having authorization with the advice of the Auditor General to retain the services of an external auditor or the Auditor General to perform audit activities of the corporation. Another feature, the independent management of operations through new standing committees, analogous to joint select committees of the Parliament. Importantly, Section 68.3 of the unofficial consolidation, which is page 41 of the bill before us, quote, a council may appoint persons not being members of council to any standing committee, and such persons may take part in the deliberations of such standing committee, but shall not vote. That is to say, the members of civil society are being given an opportunity to participate meaningfully in the deliberations of those committees which will run the municipal corporations for the betterment of the community. Another feature, the involvement of persons from the community, including the very civil society, as part of the audit committee, which persons can also be elected as the chairman of that committee, as is provided for in section 69.5 and subsection 5 and subsection 8 respectively. This empowers and demonstrates independent oversight of the management of funding from civil society. The inclusion of chief officers who are to report directly to the chief executive officers of the corporations. Funding to be sourced from, among other places, property tax collections. A game changer, Mr. Vice President, a game changer which the opposition fears, and while they will resist every move of this government to get the property tax regime up and running. We have to pause and reflect on that. We pause and we reflect by the allowing of property tax to finance the activities of the municipal corporations. This is money being collected by the revenue authorities, the people's taxes, placed in the charge of the people through their communities to improve their access to and management of meaningful empowerment. That is why I've used the word transcend. This bill transcends most previous attempts at meaningful change within the communities. Mr. Vice President, a brief history of the bill tells us that the bill has been under development for quite some time. The first attempt at local government reform in our post-independent era was assigned to the Synonon Committee in 1965, whose main recommendations were the need for a greater role and prominence of local government in the democratic and developmental processes. 2, the decentralization of key functions to local government. 3, the empowerment of communities to play more meaningful roles in the management of their assets. The work of this committee led to the enactment of the County Councils Act 1967, and we have continued since then to attempt to improve local government's enabling infrastructure. In 1974, the Hewooden Constitution Commission commenced to address constitutional reform at both local and central governmental authorities. In 1983, there was another attempt by the People's National Movement, which published a policy paper on community development and local government reform for public comment. Again, this government was committed to promote greater participation in national government through local government authorities. In 1989, the National Alliance for Reconstruction produced a policy paper outlining proposals. After public discussion, a bill was drafted, debated, and passed in Parliament in 1990, the Municipal Corporations Act 21 of 1990, which was proclaimed in 1991. That act consolidated all the available local pieces of government election. When the People's National Movement returned to office in 1991, and with its success at the 1992 local government elections, that act was amended by Act Number 8 of 1992 to now reflect 2 cities, 3 boroughs, and 9 regions. The next major attempt at reform was in 2002 under the People's National Movement, which again engaged in extensive consultation throughout all municipalities. Subsequently, several policy documents were developed, including a draft white paper in 2009. A bill was also prepared, the Local Government Bill 2010. And then finally, in 2020, may it please you, Mr. Vice President, the PNM government brought forward the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2020, which was sent to a joint select committee for consultation and amendments. So here we are today, Mr. Vice President, the report of that joint select committee. Several stakeholders have taken part in a very thorough national consultation process. The consultative process of people sharing ideas and listening to each other. The Armour Borough Corporation, the Auditor General's Department, Miaro Rio Claro Regional Corporation, Ministry of Finance, Board of Inland Revenue Division, Ministry of Finance, Valuation Division, Ministry of Planning and Development, Mr. Paul Richards, independent senator, whose contributions are always so well prepared, thoughtful, and indicative of a commitment to national development. National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago, the Pinal Debe Corporation, the Point Fortin Borough Corporation, the Port of Spain Corporation, the San Fernando City Corporation, the San Juan Laventil Regional Corporation, the Siparia Regional Corporation, Statutory Authorities Service Commission, the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Local Government, and the Water and Sewerage Authority. That was the breadth and the depth of the national consultation, and indeed it went further In that period in 2002, when the government had gone out for a national consultation, we are reminded that there have been other reports and consultations done by a plethora of stakeholders. One such stakeholder is the NGO known as Trinidad and Tobago Citizens Agenda Network, TNT-CAN, whose coordinator, Mrs. Sheila Solomon, produced a comprehensive report following consultations across the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago in 2003, giving detailed recommendations for the transformation of local government, including proposals for a citizens' agenda, infrastructure and physical planning, human resources, participatory structure, including the legal framework and best practice for councils and committees, and relations with central government. These recommendations, in fact, now form part of the current bill before us, and I have personally provided a copy of that report to the Minister for Rural Development and Local Government. Mrs. Solomon's mantra was, among others, quote, "Serious listening produces understanding and an appreciation of how ideas can complement each other rather than conflict," unquote. In everything that has been said in this debate, and in particular in the work of the Joint Select Committee and its report which has been brought here today, that mantra remains true. In our engagement with each other, Mr. Vice President, on this debate, we have heard from previous contributions of honourable members on this side, and indeed from independent senators. We've also heard from the opposition. Today I have had the privilege to listen to the Minister of Agriculture, Senator Mr. Kazim Hussain, whose comprehensive understanding of and involvement in the reality of local government in practical terms speaks volumes for the substantive value of what this bill means. I am humbled, Mr. Vice President. Today I sat and listened. I appreciated and I was educated. I salute Senator Hussain's contribution and wholly and gratefully endorse it. Our national community of Trinidad and Tobago is in good hands, and the road being charted by this bill promises a meaningful and fruitful journey to citizen participation and empowerment. Mr. Vice President, the committee recommended that its report be adopted. This was done on the 23rd of May 2022 in the House of Representatives, and so we are here today. I ask your leave today to pay tribute to one of our founding fathers, Sir Hugh Woodin, who in another context, on the 18th of February, 1967, on the occasion of his acceptance of an honorary doctorate at the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, said this, in words which today yet still ring clear and true in this conversation in which we are engaged, open quotation marks. "The call is for community effort. No democracy can survive, let alone triumph, which is not a cohesive community under law, a society of men and brethren working together with common purpose and seeking the common good," unquote. Mr. Vice President, today we as a parliament are entrusted with the constitutional authority and the mandate to pass the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Bill 2020. The time is now. We have been traveling this road since 1965. The process has been thorough and inclusive. It is imperative that we take the initiative to affirm the results and recommendations coming out of the process heralded by the report of the Joint Select Committee to supply our municipal corporations with the necessary tools to transcend and to operate and to function to the best of their ability. This is a fundamental step in empowerment for the peoples of Trinidad and Tobago in each of our communities and for our national community. Mr. Vice President, I thank you.
Senator Armour.